Why was no one answering? The static was sharp, broken, like tiny shards of glass scraping through the headset. She adjusted the dial, tapped the mic, whispered their call sign once more. Nothing, just silence. That kind of silence doesn't feel empty, it feels heavy, alive. Captain Alina Rivas pressed her back against the wall of the half-collapsed farmhouse, eyes darting across the dirt road outside. Dust clung to her lashes, her breath caught shallow in her chest. They weren't supposed to lose comms. Not here. Not this deep. Not when every move was meant to be guided, watched, covered from above. And yet, her radio had gone dead. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then twice, then fell silent too. She swallowed hard. There were 5 men under her watch, older than her, louder than her, and none of them had ever truly looked her in the eye when she'd spoken at briefing. She was just the one with the headset, the one who passed along the real orders. But now there were no orders, only her. And they didn't know it yet. Anything? Sergeant Cole's voice broke the tension. He leaned his rifle against the shattered window frame, squinting toward the tree line. His jaw was tight, his skin gray from exhaustion. Alina hesitated, then shook her head. Still nothing. Cole cursed under his breath. Private Adams, barely 20, fidgeted with his magazine like a nervous tick. The others muttered, restless, angry. Men don't like silence. Not in war. Silence makes you think. And thinking out here could kill you. She kept her voice calm, controlled. Could just be interference. Terrain's rough. We keep position until signal comes back. But her own mind whispered a truth she couldn't share. This wasn't just terrain. Back at base, she'd read the threat report twice. Enemy jammers were in play. If comms dropped, fallback procedures were clear. But fallback required someone to step up, someone to command. And command had never been written next to her name. Not officially. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her grip on the rifle. She forced them still, forced her breath steady. She couldn't let them see her crack. "Ma'am," Adam's voice was shaky, hesitant. What if they're not answering because," he trailed off. Because they were gone, because the outpost had fallen, because they were already alone. She didn't answer, not yet. A gust of hot wind blew dust into the room. The air smelled of diesel, rust, and faint smoke. Somewhere beyond the ridge, artillery had thundered hours ago. Now the world held its breath. Cole spat into the dirt. Command wouldn't leave us hanging. Something's off, real off. He glanced at her, waiting, testing. Like the others, he wasn't sure yet if she was built for this moment or if she'd crumble under the weight of it. She thought of the last thing her father had said before she shipped out. "You don't need to be louder than the room, Mija. Just be the one who doesn't look away." That memory settled her spine. She looked at Cole, steady. "We're not moving blind, not yet. Set perimeter 50 meters, no noise." He stared for a beat too long, then gave a curt nod. The others followed. And for the first time since the static began, she felt their eyes shift, not just glancing past her but toward her, measuring her, waiting for what came next. The hours crawled. Each sound outside, branches snapping, gravel crunching, tightened her nerves like wire. She rotated men in twos, always keeping someone near her, always listening. She thought about the mission brief. Simple on paper. Recon an abandoned village, confirm enemy presence, extract before dusk. Except dusk had passed, and their ride home wasn't coming. Her throat ached with thirst, but she rationed the canteen. One sip, wait, another. Her lips cracked anyway. In moments like these, memory doesn't rest. It attacks. She saw her mother's kitchen, warm light spilling over tiled counters. The smell of cinnamon, her mother humming softly as she kneaded dough. Alina had been 12 when her brother enlisted, 17 when she buried him, 22 when she signed her own papers. They told her she had the voice for comms. Calm, clear, steady. A voice that carried orders without shaking. She never told them she'd joined to feel closer to the silence her brother left behind. And now that silence had found her. Cole returned from his sweep, crouched beside her. His face was pale, lips tight. "Tracks," he whispered. "2 sets, maybe more, fresh, north tree line." Her stomach dropped. Close. Too close. The decision sat heavy on her chest. Stay and risk encirclement. Move and risk exposure. Normally she'd pass it up the chain, wait for confirmation, for safety. But the chain had snapped. It was her call. The weight of command doesn't crash down all at once. It creeps. A little voice saying, "This one's on you," and the next, and the next. She closed her eyes for a moment, just long enough to hear her own pulse. Then she opened them. "We shift south. Low ground, keep staggered, no chatter." Cole gave a hard nod, almost approving. The others followed without question. She wondered if they realized the truth yet, that she wasn't just relaying orders anymore. She was the orders. They moved through the dark like shadows. The moon was thin, clouds thick. Boots pressed soft into the earth, each step a prayer not to be heard. Alina led from the middle, watching faces, scanning flanks. Every rustle in the brush felt like an ambush. Every breath felt too loud. When Adam stumbled on a root, she caught his arm before he hit the ground. He whispered thanks, eyes wide like a child's. She gave him the faintest smile, the kind her brother used to give her when she scraped her knees. Small human moments, even here. They reached a dried riverbed, low and narrow. Good cover. She signaled down. The men slid into the dust. For a fleeting moment, it felt like control. Then, a crack sharp too close. Gunfire ripped the night apart. Bullets snapped through branches, kicked up dirt, slammed into stone. Adam screamed, clutching his arm. The others fired back, wild flashes against the dark. Alina dropped flat, ears ringing, heart hammering. She pressed her face into the dirt, smelled earth and blood and cordite. The radio on her shoulder was silent, dead. Her men shouted over the chaos. Cole's voice rose above them. "We need direction. Where the hell are they?" And in that split second she realized. It was her voice they were waiting for. Not the radio, not command, not anyone else. Hers. Her throat felt dry as stone, but she forced the words out, sharp, steady, unshaking. "Flank left to suppress. Adams, stay down." The men obeyed. Instinct, trust, desperation, whatever it was, they listened. Fire poured left, shadows moved right. The rhythm shifted, the ambush faltered. And for the first time in her life, the sound of her own voice drowned out the silence. The firefight ended as suddenly as it began. Footsteps scattered into the trees. The night fell still again. They were breathing hard, drenched in sweat, faces streaked with dirt. Adams whimpered quietly as Cole wrapped a bandage tight around his arm. Alina sat back against a rock, chest heaving, hands still trembling, not from fear, but from the echo of what she'd just done. She'd given orders, and they'd worked. But in the hollow of her chest, the question lingered. If the radio never comes back, how long before they realize I was never meant to lead them? She closed her eyes, feeling the silence press in once more. But this time, she didn't wait for a voice to break it. This time she knew it might have to be hers. How long could silence stretch before it became unbearable? The firefight had ended, but the echo clung to the men's nerves. Every creak of a branch, every shift of shadow felt like another shot about to break the night open. The moon slid behind clouds again, turning the world to ink and outlines. Alina checked Adam's bandage by the glow of a muted flashlight. His face was pale, lips trembling. The bullet had torn through flesh but missed the bone. He'd live, if they could keep him alive. "Pressure stays," she whispered, her voice even. "You'll feel numb, maybe cold. Stay awake. Talk to me if you fade." Adams nodded quickly, like a child clinging to a parent's instructions. His hand tightened around hers before she pulled away. She hadn't expected their eyes to seek hers this way. It scared her, not the bullets, not the dark, the weight. the unspoken handover of trust. Cole crouched nearby, scanning the tree line. "They'll regroup," he muttered. "Try again, maybe heavier, we can't stay here." Alina looked south. The ridge cut the horizon like a knife. Beyond it, if the maps were right, was an old supply route long abandoned. Shelter, maybe, but moving meant exposure, staying meant entrapment. Her father's voice whispered in her mind again. "Don't look away, Mija." "We move," she said, quiet, firm. The men didn't argue. They slipped from the riverbed like ghosts, every step weighted with the fear of being heard. Alina took rear this time, her rifle sweeping arcs, catching the shimmer of eyes in the dark, animals, not soldiers. Still, her heart pounded with every flicker. Her boots crunched softly on gravel. The air was colder now, damp. Mist hugged the ground, rising between their knees, swallowing their outlines. She thought of training back at base, chalkboard diagrams, clean simulations, instructors barking from safe towers. None of that prepared you for the way silence stalked you here, how it crawled beneath your skin. Halfway up the ridge, Adam stumbled again. Cole hissed at him to keep quiet. Alina's patience snapped sharper than she meant. "He's hit, he's still walking, that's enough." Cole turned, eyes narrowing. In the faint light, his expression was raw, edged with challenge. "We slow down, we die, you know it." Her pulse jumped. She wanted to shout to prove she was right. Instead, she forced her breath calm. She held his stare steady. "He keeps up or we carry him, but we don't leave him." For a long second, Cole's jaw clenched, his pride wrestling with reality. Then he looked away. "Fine, but if he drags us under, that's on you." She let the words cut, but she didn't flinch. Command wasn't about being liked. It was about not looking away. At the ridge crest, dawn began to bleed into the sky. Thin streaks of gray, then pink, then faint gold. The men collapsed into the brush, gasping, drinking the pale light like water. Alina crouched apart, scanning the horizon. The village they'd left lay silent behind them, roofs broken like teeth. Beyond, the world stretched wide, forests, dry plains, roads snaking toward mountains. Somewhere out there, allies. Somewhere, safety. But right now, they were alone. She pressed the dead radio against her lips, whispered the call sign again. Just static. She almost laughed, almost cried. Her chest ached with a truth she hadn't voiced, not to them, not to herself. She hadn't told them the jammers were likely mobile. That meant no backup, no air support, no extraction. They were cut off, and she was hiding that truth because she knew what it would do, break them before the fight even reached them. She wondered if that made her strong or a liar. The men chewed dry rations, silent except for the crinkle of wrappers. Hunger softened even the loudest soldier. Adams forced down a piece of jerky, his face pale. He glanced at Alina, voice barely above a whisper. You ever get scared?" The others looked up, even Cole. The question hung heavy. Out here, fear wasn't weakness, it was a mirror. Everyone had it. No one admitted it. Alina's first instinct was to deflect, to say what commanders always said, "Fear keeps you sharp," but the truth burned in her chest. "Every second," she admitted. The words surprised even her, but once out they didn't stop. Scared of failing, scared of not hearing the next step, scared of, she caught her breath, voice catching, not coming back, but scared doesn't mean broken. Adam's eyes glistened. Cole looked away, chewing slower. For a moment silence wrapped them again, but this time it wasn't heavy, it was shared, human. Later, when the sun climbed high, heat smothered them like a blanket. The forest thinned, ground baking hard underfoot. Flies buzzed, sweat ran down her spine. The men's movements grew sluggish, shoulders drooping. Adam stumbled more often, his bandage dark with blood. And then, a low rumble. Not thunder, not wind, engines. The sound crawled across the ground, rattling rocks, tightening guts. Alina dropped to a knee, signaling down. The men obeyed instantly, pressing into dirt. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Through the trees, faint dust clouds rose. Vehicles, armored, enemy. Her breath caught. They were too exposed. Cole whispered harshly, "What now?" She raised her fist for silence. Her eyes darted left, right. Options flicked like cards in her mind. Run and risk detection. Stay and risk discovery. Fight and be slaughtered. Her brother's face flashed in memory, young, grinning, alive before the war stole him. He once told her the worst choice is no choice. Make one even if it kills you. Her throat burned as she exhaled. Decision made. Downhill, riverbed now. No one argued. They slid, scrambled, slipped down the ridge. Dust filled their mouths, tore at their throats. The rumble grew louder. Branches whipped their faces as they crashed into the lowland, pressing flat into mud and reeds. The engines drew closer. Shadows passed overhead. Voices barked in another language. Boots crunched above them. Elena held her breath so long her lungs screamed. Sweat dripped into her eyes. Her hand gripped her rifle so tight it ached. Adams whimpered faintly. She pressed her palm over his mouth, eyes fierce. Not now, not now. The boots passed, the voices faded, the engines rumbled away. Only when silence returned did she pull her hand back, trembling. Adams gasped softly, nodding in gratitude. Cole stared at her, something unreadable in his gaze. Respect, maybe, or suspicion. She didn't meet it. She only whispered, "We move at night." When dusk fell again, they found an old shed along the abandoned route. Crumbling walls, rusted roof, but shelter, enough to breathe. The men slumped inside, exhaustion stealing their words. One by one, they drifted into uneasy sleep. Elena sat alone by the doorway, rifle across her knees, eyes fixed on the horizon. The radio sat heavy at her side, useless, mocking. She thought of her mother again. Soft hands, tired eyes, the way she'd said, "Don't let the world make you hard, Hija." But here hardness wasn't a choice. It was survival. And still a softer truth tugged inside her. The men didn't need a perfect commander. They didn't need someone unbreakable. They needed someone who wouldn't look away. Even if her voice was the only one left. The night pressed in. Crickets sang. Her men slept like children, vulnerable, trusting her to guard the silence. And in that silence she realized. The radio might never speak again. But she still could. Why did the night always feel louder when you needed it quiet? Elena lay against the cold wall of the shed, rifle balanced, ears straining. Every creak of the roof, every flutter of wings outside set her nerves on fire. She hadn't slept. Couldn't. The silence of the dead radio gnawed at her worse than hunger. The men breathed heavy in restless sleep. Cole shifted often, muttering in half-dreams. Adams whimpered once, then stilled. They were soldiers, yes, but stripped of orders, stripped of certainty. They looked fragile, human. Her own thoughts wouldn't stop. Not the way her brother's laugh had echoed in the backyard, before the letter came in black and white. Not the way her mother's hands trembled when she signed Elena's enlistment papers, as if she were giving away her last child to the same fire. She had joined for answers, for revenge, for redemption, for something she could never fully name, but out here in the thick of silence, those reasons felt paper-thin. She turned the radio dial again, static, always static. She almost hurled it into the dark, but stopped, not because she believed it would come back, but because without it she'd have no excuse, no veil. It was easier to say command isn't talking than to admit command is gone. A twig snapped outside. Her heart seized. She raised her rifle, finger brushing the trigger. Shadows moved in the tree line. 1, 2, 3. Voices whispered in the dark. Foreign, clipped, enemy. Her pulse thundered. She turned to rouse Cole but froze. If she woke them now, panic would scatter them like startled birds. So she waited, silent, listening. The voices grew louder, steps crunching closer. Then paused. A beam of flashlight swept the field. Her chest tightened. The light hovered inches from the shed door. Her finger hovered on the trigger. But then, as quickly as it came, the light moved on. Voices faded. Steps retreated. Her body sagged with relief, but her mind sharpened with the truth. They weren't wandering. They were searching, and they'd be back. She whispered into the stillness, "We move before dawn." No one heard her but herself, yet speaking it aloud gave it weight. By the time she roused them, the stars were still fatting. Cole grumbled, Adams groaned, the others blinked blearily. "We can't stay," Alina said, low but firm. "They're sweeping the area. We head east. River might lead us out." Cole squinted, jaw tight. "We're running blind. For all you know, that river runs us straight into their hands." Her voice didn't waver. "Then we'll find out first, but if we stay here, they'll find us." The silence that followed wasn't doubt. It was reluctant agreement. Cole cursed softly but didn't push further. They moved. The forest closed around them like a cage. Roots clawed at their boots, branches snagged their gear. Every step was a negotiation with exhaustion. Adam stumbled again, weaker by the hour. His arm had gone fever-hot, his lips dry. Alina slowed to match his pace. She slipped an arm under his shoulder, steadying him. He whispered, Why are you helping me? I'm just slowing everyone down." Her throat tightened. She thought of her brother again, bloody and still, the day the flag-draped coffin arrived. She couldn't carry him then. She couldn't save him. But she could carry Adams now. "Because you're one of us," she said softly. Adams' eyes glistened, but he said no more. By midday, the river came into view, wide, sluggish, its banks thick with reeds. The men dropped to their knees, drinking greedily, splashing their faces. Relief rippled through them, brief but real. Alina scanned the tree line, every muscle tense. Relief was dangerous. Relief made you slow. Cole joined her, his tone low. "You keep making calls like you've done this before." She stiffened. "I'm doing what needs to be done." He studied her, eyes sharp. "You're not just relaying, you're leading. That wasn't in the brief." Her chest tightened. She wanted to tell him the truth, that she'd been a voice, nothing more. That command had died with the radio, that she was bluffing half her choices, praying the rest. But if she said it, trust would shatter. So she met his gaze. "Do you want me to stop?" His jaw worked. Then finally, "No, I want you to keep us alive." The admission caught her off guard. She nodded once, unable to speak. They followed the river downstream, shadows stretching long as evening fell. The landscape shifted, trees thinning, ground turning to rocky flats. The sound of rushing water grew louder, promising a larger crossing ahead. But with it came something else. Smoke. Faint but sharp. Alina raised her fist. The men froze. Her nose wrinkled, catching the scent. Not wood fire, diesel. She crept forward, belly low. Through the reeds she saw it, an enemy encampment. Vehicles, tents, armed men lounging near fires. At least a dozen, maybe more. Her stomach dropped. They were boxed. The river on one side, the camp on the other. Retreat meant backtracking into exposure. Cole's whisper hissed behind her, "Options." She swallowed hard. Her mind raced. Fight, suicide, waited out, risk detection, circle wide, hours lost, Adams bleeding more. Her hands shook. For the first time she nearly said it, "I don't know." But then Adams groaned, his body collapsing against a rock. Blood seeped fresh through his bandage. His time was running out. Her choice sharpened. We steal what we can, supplies, medical, then we move past while they sleep. Cole's eyes widened. That's insane. Her voice was iron. It's survival. Night fell. They waited until the fires dimmed, until laughter slurred into snores. Then they crept forward, shadows among shadows. Alina led this time, heart pounding like a war drum. Every step was risk. Every breath could betray them. She slipped into a tent, hands trembling as she rifled through crates. Bandages, morphine, canteens. She shoved them into her pack, fighting the urge to shake. Then, A cough behind her. She froze, slowly turned. A soldier sat up, rubbing his eyes, squinting at her silhouette. His mouth opened. Her body moved before her mind. The rifle butt cracked against his temple. He slumped, silent. Her hands trembled violently now. Her breath shook. She had silenced him, but she would never unsee his face. She whispered to herself, voice cracking, "Don't look away." Outside, Cole signaled urgency. They slipped back into the dark, packs heavier, hearts racing. They crossed the far bank as dawn began to edge the sky. Behind them, the camp slept on, unaware of the ghosts who had passed through. Alina bound Adam's wound with new bandages, injected morphine into his trembling arm. His relief was immediate, his eyes soft with gratitude. The others ate hungrily from stolen rations, their strength slowly returning. For a brief moment, hope felt real again. But Alina sat apart, hands still shaking, eyes on the horizon. She had crossed a line tonight, she knew it. They hadn't just survived, they had stolen survival from the jaws of others. And the silence after that act felt different, heavier. Because deep down, she knew something she hadn't told them. The enemy camp wasn't just a camp, it was a signal post. And if the radio had been dead before, it was screaming now. How could silence feel so loud? The sun had barely crested the hills when they moved again, shadows long against the cracked earth. The river behind them rippled in the morning light, sparkling, deceptively peaceful. But Alina knew better. Peace was a lie. Out here, every calm moment carried the promise of chaos. Adams leaned heavily on Cole's shoulder, exhaustion etched in every line of his face. Alina walked ahead, scanning the terrain, ears straining for movement or sound. The stolen supplies weighed on her pack like a reminder of the lines she had crossed, lines she couldn't take back. She wondered if her brother had ever felt this way, the weight of choices that weren't really choices at all. He had died believing the world was black and white. She knew better now, but understanding the gray didn't make it easier. The forest thinned as they pressed on, giving way to rocky flats. Dust rose under their boots, coating faces and hands. Cole's voice broke the quiet. "You sure we're going the right way?" Alina didn't look back, as sure as we'll ever be. Doubt licked at her mind like a flame. The maps were outdated, and the river might twist into territory they had no intelligence on. One wrong bend could lead them straight into another ambush, or worse. She pressed on, not because she had to, but because stopping meant thinking, and thinking right now meant seeing all the ways they could die. Adams groaned again, leaning against a rock. Alina knelt beside him, checking his bandage. The bleeding had slowed, but the infection was already creeping in. His eyes met hers, wide and vulnerable. You saved us," he whispered, voice hoarse. "All of us." She swallowed. The words didn't fit the weight she carried. She hadn't saved anyone, not really. She had kept them alive for now. Tomorrow could be different. Midday heat pressed down on them like a physical weight. Alina's throat was raw from constant vigilance, lips cracking from dehydration. Her own body ached, fatigue gnawing at every muscle. And yet she couldn't rest. Not fully. Not while the river led them toward unknown dangers. She remembered a training exercise from months ago. A mock village under attack, civilians trapped, soldiers coordinating evacuation. She had excelled in drills, praised for calm under pressure. But out here, drills were meaningless. Fear was real. Consequences were real. Every misstep could mean death, not a simulation, not a grade, not commendation. The men trudged silently, eyes forward, trusting her direction. Trust she had not earned in any official capacity, only through necessity. As evening approached, the terrain changed again. A ridge rose sharply ahead, jagged rocks making every step treacherous. Alina scanned for cover, calculating the safest path. Cole came alongside her, tone low. "You've been holding back something." She didn't flinch. "What makes you say that?" "You're too calm sometimes. like you're hiding the fear." Her jaw tightened. He was right. Fear lurked beneath her control, a constant pulse she couldn't silence, but admitting it would break the fragile trust she'd built. "You don't need to understand," she said quietly. He nodded, unsatisfied but silent. Night fell quickly in the rocky flats. They set up minimal cover against a small outcrop, eating the last of their rations. Adam sat with his head in his hands, Cole cleaning his rifle, the others tending to wounds and gear. Alina remained apart, staring at the dead radio. Static had replaced the faint hope she'd clung to. No one would know if reinforcements were coming. No one would know if they were walking into a trap. Her mind wandered to her family. Mother, alone in the kitchen, still humming faintly. Memories of her brother, lost and silent. She could almost feel the weight of their absence pressing down, a reminder of why she had taken this path. Her voice broke the night as she whispered to herself, "We'll get through this." The words felt hollow, but she had to believe them. The following day, the ridge forced them into open ground. A scouting position revealed enemy patrols ahead, moving methodically. Alina crouched, calculating. Her pulse thundered. One misstep and they could be overrun. She looked back at her men, seeing fatigue etched into every line of their faces. Adams leaned on Cole's arm, shoulders slumped. Each step had cost them something: strength, morale, innocence. She pressed her lips together. This was the moment where leadership became something more than giving orders. It became intuition, risk, and resolve. "Stay low, follow my lead. Move slow," she whispered. The men obeyed without question. Hours passed like this, crawling, shadows stretching, muscles screaming. The enemy patrol passed unaware. Alina exhaled quietly. Relief, sharp and sudden, washed over her. Cole broke the silence. "You've changed everything, Rivas, for us, for survival. I didn't think you had it in you." Her lips pressed into a thin line. Compliment or challenge? Praise or observation? She didn't answer. Trust was a fragile thing. She didn't want to risk breaking it with words. Instead, she focused on the river, the ridge beyond, the path that might lead them to safety. By dawn, they reached a clearing where the river widened. The sound of rushing water filled the air, a small comfort after days of silence. Alina knelt by the bank, letting Adams sip slowly, Cole doing the same for the others. They moved along the river, careful, methodical. Every step was measured. Every sound was danger. And yet in that small moment there was a sense of unity, of survival, of trust forged not in words or rank but in necessity. Alina's mind turned again to the brother she had lost, to the mother waiting at home, to the silence she had inherited and now wielded like a weapon. She whispered again softly, "We move forward, always forward." The ridge ahead promised the end of this stretch of river, but shadows lingered. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Alina felt it in her bones, the calm before the storm. Cole leaned close. "You feel that?" She nodded. "Stay ready, keep low, move together, no mistakes." The men didn't argue. Trust was no longer a question. It had become a lifeline. Night fell again. They found shelter under an overhang, the river murmuring below. Exhaustion wrapped around them like a blanket. Adam slept fitfully, murmuring in his dreams. Cole sat awake, rifle across his knees. The others huddled quietly. Alina stared at the dark horizon, thoughts spiraling. Each step forward had demanded courage, but also compromise. Each decision she had made, from orders to ambush to theft, had pulled her further into moral gray. And yet she had no choice. Not now, not ever. She rested her rifle across her lap, breathing the night air, thinking, sometimes courage isn't loud. It doesn't roar. It whispers in the moments no one else sees. And sometimes it is all you have. The river flowed endlessly below. The horizon waited. And Alina knew that tomorrow the silence would speak again, and she would have to answer. Why did the forest feel alive at night? Every shadow seemed to pulse, every rustle a warning. Alina crouched against the cold stone, rifle resting across her knees, eyes scanning the darkness. The river beside them whispered secrets in the faint moonlight, carrying the echo of distant gunfire from a place they could not see. She could feel it in her bones. Something was coming. Something that would test every decision she had made, every ounce of courage she had mustered. Cole stirred beside her, breaking the fragile quiet. "Do you ever wonder if we'll make it?" Alina didn't answer at first. Words had a weight here that bullets did not. She could not afford to break the fragile trust that held them together. But the truth hovered at the edge of her mind, raw and relentless. "Every step we take is a risk," she said finally, voice low, controlled. "But standing still is worse." Cole's eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw the man behind the soldier, weary, scared, burdened by the same fears she carried. He nodded, silently acknowledging her unspoken command. The men were restless. Adams shifted uneasily, his bandaged arm throbbing, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked at Alina, a mixture of fear and hope in his eyes. "You've kept us alive this long," he whispered. "How?" Alina swallowed, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her chest. "I don't know," she admitted softly. "I just don't look away, that's all I can do." Adams nodded, understanding more than she realized. Sometimes survival was not about strategy, not about firepower, it was about presence, being there when it mattered most. They moved at first light, following the river as it twisted through the rocky terrain. Each step was careful, deliberate. Alina led from the middle this time, flanked by Cole and the others, eyes constantly scanning for movement. The silence was oppressive, birds had vanished, the wind was still, even the river seemed cautious. Then a faint glimmer of movement in the distance. Alina froze, hand raised. Shadows shifted near the tree line, a patrol, lightly armed, scanning for signs of movement. She counted, 6, maybe 7. Not enough to overrun them if they stayed hidden, but enough to compromise their escape. She signaled the men to stay low. Heart hammering, she mapped out a path. Through the reeds, around the rocks, keeping the patrol on the opposite side of the river. Every step was measured. Every breath could betray them. Hours passed in tense silence. The sun climbed higher, heat pressing down, making each movement a battle against fatigue. Adams stumbled repeatedly, each time Alina supporting him, whispering encouragement. Cole grunted beside her. "You're going to break yourself before this is over." Alina's lips pressed into a thin line. "Not an option." He shook his head, muttering under his breath, but he didn't challenge her. Leadership sometimes demanded obedience, even against one's better judgment. And she had learned that in the past few days. By late afternoon, they reached a narrow gorge. The river narrowed here, rushing over jagged rocks. Crossing would be perilous but necessary. Alina studied the terrain. A fallen tree offered a precarious bridge. One misstep and they'd be swept into the current. Cole raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this?" Her eyes didn't waver. "It's the only way." Adams looked at her, fear etched in his features. "What if we fall?" She knelt beside him, gripping his shoulder. "Then we climb, we fight, we survive, but we don't stop, ever." The words were not just a command, they were a promise. One by one, they crossed the tree. Alina went last, eyes scanning the gorge, rifle raised, ready for anything. Her heart pounded in her ears. The current below roared like a living thing, threatening to swallow them whole. Adam slipped mid-crossing. Alina caught him just in time, muscles straining, sweat dripping into her eyes. His wide-eyed gaze met hers. I thought I was done." "You're not," she said softly. "Not yet, not as long as I'm here." Cole crossed next, muttering about madness and luck. The others followed, tense and silent. Finally, Alina slid across, heart still hammering. Night fell again, and they set up minimal shelter on the far side. Exhaustion weighed them down, but the men were alive. They were together, and for now, that was enough. Alina sat apart, staring at the river. It was relentless, moving without hesitation, carrying everything forward. She thought of her brother, of the choices she had made, of the silence that had followed each loss. Sometimes, she realized, courage wasn't about bravery in the moment. It was about persistence. It was about continuing when fear screamed to stop. The men slept, exhausted but safe. Adams leaned heavily against Cole, breathing shallow but steady. The others huddled under makeshift covers. Alina's fingers traced the radio, dead and useless at her side. She didn't curse it. She didn't rage against it. She simply understood. It wasn't the radio that kept them alive. It was her. And that realization brought a quiet strength she hadn't known she possessed. The next morning, dawn revealed a path forward, gentler terrain, forests giving way to open fields. But freedom was deceptive. Enemy patrols were closer, tracks visible in the mud. The stolen supplies were heavy, slowing them down. Adam's arm throbbed with fever. Every step was calculated, every decision carrying weight. Alina led them, scanning constantly, keeping a mental map of the terrain, the river, the patrols, the path they must take. She remembered her father's advice, don't look away. She wouldn't, not now, not ever. By midday, they reached a small abandoned outpost. Rusted vehicles, crumbling walls, shelter enough to rest, to bandage wounds, to catch their breath. Alina allowed herself a brief moment to close her eyes, resting against the wall. Cole sat nearby, silently observing. Adams slept, bandaged arm supported, breathing easier. The others moved quietly, tending to minor wounds. In that stillness, Alina reflected, courage wasn't heroics. It wasn't glory. It was persistence. It was keeping alive those who depended on you, even when your own fear threatened to overwhelm. The river outside whispered against rocks, carrying with it a promise of the next challenge. And Alina knew, whatever came, she would face it. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And she had already begun. Why did the shadows feel heavier than the day? The sun had dipped low, stretching the forest in long, dark fingers. Alina led the men along a narrow path beside the river, boots crunching softly on gravel. The stolen supplies weighed heavily, but so did her thoughts. Every choice she had made to survive, every line she had crossed, pressed against her conscience. She wondered, not for the first time, if courage always required compromise. Cole walked beside her, rifle slung, jaw tight. "We've been lucky," he muttered. "Too lucky, luck about to run out." Alina's lips pressed together. She didn't answer. Luck hadn't kept them alive. Vigilance, calculation, and an unwillingness to look away had. Luck was irrelevant. Adams trailed behind, exhaustion evident in every step. His bandaged arm swung lightly, blood seeping faintly through the wrapping. Alina caught a glimpse of his pale face, eyes half-lidded, sweat glistening on his forehead. She felt the weight of responsibility press down harder. She had to keep them alive, even if it meant hiding her own fear. Night came fast. The river's murmur was a constant companion, but so was the silence of the forest. Each snap of twig or rustle of leaves made her pulse spike. She signaled for a halt, crouching behind a fallen log. The men obeyed, tense and silent. Cole whispered, "I hear them." Alina's eyes narrowed. Far ahead, movement, shadows shifting among the trees. Enemy patrols, lightly armed, scanning for tracks, searching for signs of intrusion. She counted, at least 8, maybe more. Her mind raced. They couldn't outrun them. They couldn't fight them head-on. They had no comms, no support, no backup, only each other. The choice was clear. They would have to hide. They slipped into a thicket, hearts hammering. Alina crouched, scanning constantly, noting each patrol's position, estimating their patterns. Adams leaned heavily against a rock, breathing shallow. "You've got a plan," Cole whispered. She exhaled slowly. "We wait, let them pass. Then we move, stick to the shadows, follow my lead." Cole's brow furrowed. "And if they split up?" Her jaw tightened. "Then we adapt, we survive, we move." Every word was heavy with truth. Leadership wasn't about bravado. It was about foresight, adaptability, the willingness to bear the burden of others' lives even when the weight threatened to crush you. Hours passed in tense silence. The patrols shifted, some retreating, others lingering. Alina timed every movement with painstaking precision. One misstep would mean exposure. One misstep would cost lives. Adams groaned softly, fever hot. Alina knelt beside him, pressing a damp cloth to his forehead. "Stay with me," she whispered. "You're stronger than you think." He blinked at her, trust and fear mingling in his gaze. "I thought I'd die." "You're not," she said firmly. "Not today, not as long as I'm here." Cole watched silently, finally nodding in acknowledgement. He had begun to understand the weight of her presence, not just as a commander, but as the anchor holding them together. By midnight, they reached a small ridge overlooking an enemy outpost. Fires glimmered below, tents scattered, guards patrolling with rifles slung low but alert. Alina surveyed the layout, calculating risks, steal supplies, bypass them entirely, move through the undergrowth and risk detection. Her hands shook faintly, not from fear, but from the intensity of responsibility. Each decision would ripple across the lives of those following her. She crouched, scanning every shadow, every movement. Then finally she made a choice. "We go now," she whispered. "Stick to the trees, avoid the clearing, keep low." Cole's eyes widened. "You're taking us straight past them." Her gaze didn't waver. "Yes, quiet, precise, no mistakes, we move as one." The night became a gauntlet. Branches whipped their faces. Mud sucked at boots. Every step was measured, calculated, silent. A single misstep could spark gunfire, could unravel all they had survived. Alina's pulse drummed in her ears. Her mind cycled rapidly. Patrols, paths, escape routes, contingencies. Survival was more than instinct now. It was strategy, and the weight of command pressed on her relentlessly. Adam stumbled, nearly catching the attention of a patrolling guard. Alina's hand shot out, steadying him, eyes fierce. "Not a sound, not a move, keep with me." He nodded, terror in his eyes, but he obeyed. Halfway past the outpost, disaster nearly struck. A patrol split unexpectedly, crossing their path. Alina froze, heart hammering. Cole's hand grasped her arm, eyes wide. "Move," she whispered, voice barely audible. "Now." They pressed flat into the brush. The patrol passed, a hair's breadth away. The air was thick with tension, every breath a gamble. Alina's body quaked, not with fear, but with adrenaline, with the crushing weight of the responsibility she had claimed. Once the patrol receded, she exhaled slowly. Adams clutched her arm. "I thought we were done for." "You're not," she said softly. "Not today, not while I'm here." Cole glanced at her, respect tempered with disbelief. Leadership often arrives unexpectedly, forged in moments like these, and he saw it now, clear, undeniable. They slipped past the last guard and reached a small clearing. Moonlight spilled over the ground, illuminating a narrow path along the river. Safe for now. Alina allowed herself a moment to breathe, closing her eyes. She thought of her brother, of the countless losses she had endured, and of the weight she had carried silently for so long. This was why she had joined. Not for glory, not for medals, not for recognition. She had joined to meet silence with courage, to turn absence into action, to prove to herself that fear would not dictate her life. The men were weary, silent, alive, and that was enough. Dawn came, faint light spilling over the horizon. The river glimmered, reflecting the pale pinks and golds of morning. Alina scanned the horizon, heart still hammering from the night's trials. Cole broke the quiet. "You've changed everything, Rivas. You saved us." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't answer immediately. Praise felt heavy. It implied choice, that she could have done otherwise. And yet in her heart she understood the truth. She had done what she had to do, not because she was brave, but because she refused to look away. She looked at her men, silent, trusting her entirely. And in that moment she realized, courage is often quiet. It doesn't roar. It whispers in the moments no one sees. The river flowed endlessly below. The horizon awaited, and Alina knew, deep in her bones, that whatever came next she would meet it. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Why did the forest feel like it was holding its breath? The morning fog clung to the riverbank, thick and cold, wrapping the men in a quiet they didn't trust. Alina's eyes darted constantly, scanning tree line, shadows, every irregularity in the terrain. The outpost they had passed was now far behind, but the knowledge of enemy patrols lingered like a phantom. Every step was a negotiation with danger, every glance a question, every breath a gamble. Cole broke the silence. We can't keep running forever. Alina didn't respond immediately. Running hadn't saved them before. Planning hadn't saved them before. Only presence, vigilance, and quiet decisiveness had. She weighed her options, heart hammering. Then we stop smartly, she said finally. We find cover, reassess, and move with purpose, not panic. Cole gave a slow nod, not entirely convinced. Adams, pale and fevered, leaned on the bank, barely conscious, trusting her entirely. The terrain shifted as they moved inland. Thick forest gave way to rolling hills, dotted with jagged rocks and sparse trees. Visibility was better, but so was exposure. Alina's hands tightened around her rifle. Every step forward was deliberate, calculated. Hours into the march, the sound of boots shattered the deceptive calm. Enemy patrols, closer than expected, moving methodically. Alina froze, signaling the men to halt. They pressed against the slope, bodies low, barely breathing. The patrol passed, rifles scanning, unaware of the shadows pressed against the earth. Alina's throat was dry. Sweat ran down her spine. Her fingers trembled slightly on her rifle, not from fear, but from the responsibility she bore. If she miscalculated now, everything would collapse. Night approached fast, shadows growing long. The men's fatigue was visible. Adams leaned heavily against Cole, struggling to maintain footing. Alina crouched ahead, silent, sensing a potential ambush before it materialized. Then a crack, a twig snapped underfoot. Alina's pulse spiked. She raised her rifle instinctively. Ahead, movement, figures emerging from the shadows, rifles trained in their direction. The enemy had found them. Cole whispered, "We're trapped." Alina's mind raced. There was no cover in the open field. Adams could barely move. Retreat wasn't an option. Every tactical possibility dissolved under the weight of immediacy. Her decision had to be instant, unwavering. "Split," she whispered. "Adams stays with me, the others flank left. Move fast, move quiet, cover me." The men obeyed instantly. Training, trust, and necessity overrode hesitation. Alina supported Adams, keeping him low, moving swiftly yet silently. The enemy fired intermittently, bullets cracking through the night, embedding in rocks and soil. Her heart pounded with every step, every breath a negotiation with death. She could feel the weight of the stolen supplies, the injured men, the lives dependent on her decisions. One misstep and all would be lost. Adam's breathing was shallow, pain etched in every line of his face. Alina whispered constant encouragements, soft but firm. "You're with me. We survive, trust me." Cole and the others circled, firing sporadically to distract and delay. Alina's focus never wavered. Survival wasn't about heroics. It was about execution, precision, and mental endurance. The enemy was relentless. They pressed, probing, attempting to box the group in. Each encounter tested not just physical stamina but emotional resilience. Alina's mind flicked to her family, her brother's laughter, her mother's hands, and she drew on it, a source of quiet, unyielding strength. She couldn't fail. Not now, not after everything. Hours of tense movement passed. The group finally reached a small grove of dense trees. They pressed against the foliage, catching their breath, hiding from patrols that would never stop searching. Adams slumped to the ground, fever high, face pale. Cole checked him, muttering grimly, "He won't last much longer if we don't find medical help." Alina's jaw tightened. Resources were scarce. Options were scarce. Morality now was measured in survival, yet she refused to falter. Her hand rested on Adam's shoulder. "We're not done. Not yet. Keep moving with me." Her words were both command and promise, carrying weight that went beyond any rank insignia. Dawn broke, painting the world in pale golds and pinks. The river shimmered faintly in the distance. Beyond lay a narrow path through the hills, potentially leading to a small village, or at least shelter. Alina led cautiously, constantly scanning. Every shadow, every movement held potential threat. Cole and the others followed, silently acknowledging her leadership. They moved slowly but with determination. Adams leaned on Alina, drawing strength from her presence, trusting in the steady certainty she provided. By midday they found a small abandoned cabin, half collapsed, roof caved in. Shelter enough to rest, perhaps treat wounds, perhaps plan. Alina allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. The men slumped, exhausted, finally releasing some tension. Cole checked Adam's fever, muttering about luck and endurance. Alina's eyes rested on the river. It was constant, relentless, flowing endlessly despite obstacles. She drew a quiet parallel. Leadership, courage, survival, endless, demanding, often unseen. She whispered to herself, "Sometimes courage doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers in the moments no one else sees." And tonight, she had whispered loud enough to keep her team alive. The evening descended softly, stars appearing above, each one a faint reminder of the world beyond this war-torn landscape. Alina sat alone outside the cabin, rifle across her knees, staring at the horizon. She thought of her brother, of the sacrifices she had endured, and of the silence that had followed each loss. The radio remained dead, but she realized it didn't matter. It had never mattered. It was her presence, her unyielding focus, and her unwillingness to look away that had kept them alive. And as the night pressed in, she knew this. No one else could lead them through this darkness. No one else could shoulder this weight. She whispered again, soft, unbroken, "We move forward, always forward." And in that quiet determination, she understood the truth she had carried from the beginning. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did the silence feel heavier than gunfire? Alina crouched against the bank of the river, eyes tracing the horizon where jagged hills cut sharp shadows into the pale morning light. They had survived every threat the forest and enemy patrols had thrown at them, but instinct whispered. The hardest part was yet to come. The men moved quietly behind her, exhaustion etched into every line of their faces. Adams leaned heavily on Cole, shivering from fever but alive. Each step forward was a negotiation with fate itself. Every breath felt like both a gift and a warning. Alina's hands gripped her rifle tightly, knuckles white. She didn't speak. Not yet. Every word might give away their position. Every sound was dangerous. A distant clang echoed from the ridge ahead. Enemy vehicles, their engines muted but unmistakable, rolled along a faint dirt path. The group froze, pressed low into the reeds. Cole whispered, "We can't outrun that." Alina's gaze swept the terrain, calculating. The river bank offered cover, but the enemy would be watching. The open field ahead was a death trap. The ridge offered some elevation, but exposure. Choices narrowed, deadlines loomed, and hesitation could be fatal. She exhaled slowly, forcing her fear into quiet determination. "We flank left, stick to cover, move like shadows, no mistakes." The men nodded. They trusted her implicitly now, but she knew trust was fragile. One miscalculation and it would shatter. They moved as silently as possible, feet sinking into wet mud, reeds brushing faces and arms. Every step was a test of endurance and resolve. Adam's breathing rattled softly against the night's hush, and Alina kept one hand on his shoulder, guiding him, steadying him, reminding him he was not alone. Cole went ahead briefly, scouting, and returned with a tense nod. Paths clear, but not for long. Alina's pulse accelerated. The enemy's patrols were faster than anticipated. They would be on them in minutes if they hesitated. "Then we move now," she whispered. The forest thinned, giving way to jagged rocks and open ground. Patrols appeared ahead, rifles slung but ready, scanning for tracks, for movement, for signs of intrusion. Alina pressed the men into a shallow dip between boulders, hearts hammering. She whispered precise instructions. "Split briefly, flank left and right, keep Adams with her." Every action had to be exact. There was no room for error. Gunfire erupted before they could fully execute the plan. A soldier yelled orders, bullets kicking up dirt and splintering rocks. Alina dove, dragging Adams with her. Cole fired carefully from cover, suppressing the patrol's advance. The others followed, disciplined, moving as one despite exhaustion. Minutes stretched into eternity, each breath a gamble, each heartbeat a negotiation with death. Alina's mind raced, calculating distances, evaluating threats, anticipating enemy reactions. She could feel the weight of the stolen supplies in her pack, the weight of her men's lives on her shoulders, the weight of choices she couldn't undo pressing into her chest. One patrol member broke from cover, charging. Alina's rifle rose instinctively, shot precise, stopping him cold. Her stomach twisted. Every life taken in necessity left a mark, and tonight each mark pressed heavily. By dawn, the firefight had died down. The enemy retreated to regroup. The men were bloodied, bruised, but alive. Adams leaned heavily against a rock, eyes closed, finally letting himself rest. Cole approached Alina, voice low. "You kept us alive, all of us." Alina's jaw tightened. She hadn't kept anyone alive. She had guided them, yes, but survival had been theirs to claim as much as hers. She had merely refused to look away. Her voice was soft. "We survived together, that's all." The group pressed onward, finally reaching a ridge overlooking a small village. Smoke curled gently from chimneys. The promise of safety, or at least temporary reprieve, greeted them in the dawn light. Adams whispered, We made it." Alina's lips pressed together. Relief was sweet but fleeting. The journey was not over, but for the first time in days, fear loosened its grip just enough to allow hope. She looked at the men, weary, battered, but alive, and she realized something she hadn't allowed herself to fully see. Courage didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it acted quietly, invisibly, and the world only recognized it after the fact. Night fell again, and they rested in the village outskirts. Alina remained awake longer than the others, staring at the horizon. Every choice, every moral compromise, every silent command echoed in her mind. She thought of her brother, of her mother, of the promise she had made to herself when she joined the mission. Courage wasn't glory. It wasn't recognition. It was persistence. It was the quiet refusal to look away when all else demanded it. She touched the dead radio once more, remembering the panic, the fear, the responsibility. It was useless, yes, but it had forced her to act, to lead, to carry them through darkness without reliance on anyone else. The final morning broke with light spilling over hills and river, gentle, unassuming. Alina stood at the ridge, watching the world awaken. The men stirred behind her, safe, alive, trusting her. She let herself exhale fully for the first time in days. The journey had not been easy. It had demanded courage, yes, but also sacrifice, moral compromise, and unyielding determination. And through it all, she had refused to look away. She whispered softly, more to herself than anyone else. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." Adams leaned on Cole, finally able to smile faintly. Cole gave her a brief nod of respect. The others moved quietly, bruised but intact, and Alina knew in her bones that this was enough. They had survived. They had endured. and they had done so together, bound by trust, courage, and the unspoken promise to see each other through the darkness. The river flowed endlessly below. The horizon stretched, indifferent yet welcoming, and Alina, standing tall despite exhaustion, felt the quiet satisfaction of someone who had faced impossible choices and survived. She turned back briefly, looking at the men who had trusted her with their lives. Their eyes met hers, gratitude and recognition silent but clear. She gave them a small nod, the weight of leadership shared in that gesture alone. The forest whispered behind them. The river carried secrets they would never speak of, and for the first time the silence felt full, not empty, not threatening, but full of lessons, courage, and quiet dignity. Alina exhaled, feeling the tension drain. She had led them through darkness. She had refused to look away, and in doing so she had proven what courage truly sounded like. The wind carried away the echoes of past battles. She looked to the horizon once more, the sunrise painting gold over the river, the forest, the distant hills. The mission was over, but the lessons endured. Sometimes survival demanded heroics. Sometimes it demanded silence. And sometimes the loudest statement of all was simply to act, to lead, to endure, and to refuse ever to look away. The group moved forward together, step by step, into the new day. The river flowed beside them, unstoppable, and Alina walked at its edge, quietly unbroken, forever changed but resolute.